What's up, it's Cinema Shogun here, and hide your kids, hide your wives. Billie Jo, Quinton Simon's grandmother, is getting out of jail today. And unless something changes, Billie Jo is scheduled to be released today, just in time for Christmas. Now listen, I know people are going to be upset by this, and I understand why. Personally, I'm happy that they sat Billie Jo's ass down for a little while. Because I know some people think she should be locked away for a long time. Some people kind of feel bad for Billie Jo. At the end of the day, I think Billie Jo needed some time to really think about her actions. I don't 100% blame Billie Jo for what happened to Quinton. I'm not going to go outside of Billie Jo's house and yell things at her. I don't need for Billie Jo to suffer in this way and that way. But I'm not going to ignore the fact that Billie Jo created the environment in which Quinton was killed in. Billie Jo created a toxic environment for all of her kids, as well as her grandkids. There's no mistaking that. I don't think that it's necessary to stand outside of Billie Jo's house and yell at her every time she walks out the door, but I'm also not going to pretend like Billie Jo is an angel. I'm not going to pretend like she's totally innocent here. At the end of the day, Billie Jo created a toxic environment for everyone that was under her roof. She now has 2 kids in jail for murder. 2. And a dead grandchild. That should tell you everything you need to know right there. That should tell you everything you need to know right there. And there's a long history of other stuff that has happened under Billie Jo's watch. Let's just say that. Now, I know a lot of people were thinking that Billie Jo was going to be held forever. And we didn't know exactly why Billie Jo was locked up. I know we've heard things online, but officially we haven't been given a reason as to why. We know that it was a contempt of court for something that happened in the juvenile court because Billie Jo is going through a custody battle with Leilani's other 2 kids. And let me just say this. I'm sorry. I do not like the thought of kids being caught up in the system. I would prefer for kids to be with their family. In a usual situation like this one, I would prefer for the kids to maybe be with their grandparents. But in this situation, Billie Jo has already striked out too many times. You got 2 of your own kids in jail for murder. 1 of your grandkids was thrown into a trash dumpster. She doesn't need kids around her. Period. So I understand there's these 2 sides. There's the side that really hates Billie Jo. And then there's the side that wants to defend Billie Jo. And much like everything else in this country, these 2 sides, they start to radicalize each other. Because it's perfectly reasonable for you to want Billie Jo to be held accountable in some way. It's also perfectly reasonable if you're on the other side and you feel like, people shouldn't be outside of her house and causing mayhem in the middle of the street. That's perfectly reasonable. But what happens is these 2 sides, they go at each other, and over time, each side becomes more extreme. I've seen people saying that Billie Jo needs to get the death penalty and should be locked up for the rest of her life. That's a little extreme. But on the other hand, I see people fighting, Billie Jo needs to get custody of Leilani's kids. That's really extreme. Billie Jo doesn't need custody of anyone. Billie Jo hardly needs custody of herself. So can we please end that nonsense? Yes, I agree. What was done to Billie Jo and outside of her house, that was not right. I do not like that. But just because that happened doesn't mean that we have to worship at the altar of Billie Jo and pretend as if this woman is a saint that does no wrong and she should have these kids. No, the hell she should not. Keep Billie Jo away from all kids. If I was a member of the family, I wouldn't even bring my kids over to Billie Jo's house. Billie Jo, fine. Be free to live the life that you want to live. Go and do whatever you want to do. Do not be around kids. You have failed in that department. And you should not get another chance at all. But, as you all know, the Quinton Simon story is winding down. I don't think we're going to get too much more information. We're going to get some. Don't get me wrong. There's still plenty of things to find out here. But what happens when you get to these points in these cases, people start to get really extreme. Because people invest themselves into these cases and sometimes they don't want to let things go. I mean, look at the Kylie Rodney situation. People are still talking about it, pretending as if it's an open case and there's still all this stuff going on. People don't want to let it go because, for one, people have become obsessed. And for two, it's part of the money train. So when it comes to the Quinton Simon situation, it's just like all other true crime cases. When you get to this point where there's not information coming in, people create their own information, and then people start going off the deep end. There's this one post that was left on social media, someone claiming to be a friend of Leilani's family. And this post is making the rounds everywhere. I've had like 36 people send me this post, asking me, is this true? What do I think about this? And man, I'm not even going to read this post because I feel like it's extremely disrespectful. And also, it's blatantly obvious that this is a troll. But people are rolling with this now. Just to give you an idea of what was said in this post, they're basically saying that Leilani was jealous of Quinton because Quinton and Danny had a little relationship going on. And I don't mean, oh, Danny liked Quinton. No, they're saying that Leilani was jealous of Quinton because Danny and Quinton were like getting it on physically. Like really weird stuff. And it's obviously not true. The amount of stuff they say here, like Quinton would come around with his diaper hanging off, just trying to entice Danny, trying to turn him on. And it's like some really sick, twisted, weird stuff. I'm sure some of you have seen this post. Please, for the love of God, most of us, I think all of us mainly are adults here. Please learn to distinguish the real from the fake. I understand that some things are kind of hard to tell. It's hard to tell what's true and what's not. But when we have someone talking about a grown man and a baby being in a relationship together, and that Quinton was purposely teasing Danny sexually and all types of weird stuff like that, they were talking about how Quinton would like provocatively like do things in front of Danny to entice him and to turn him on. And it gets really weird to the point where I'm disturbed. And I'm not even going to read it here on this video because it's totally gross. It's gross, disrespectful, weird. And my thing is, if you've seen this post, why? The reality is that someone is sick enough to just sit at home. It's like, okay, I'm just going to make this weird story about a dead child. Why? Why do people do this? And the more and more I look into true crime and I talk about true crime, the more I realize that true crime draws in a bunch of shitty, weird, crazy people. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of wonderful, well put together, awesome people who watch true crime. A lot of you all are really smart and educated. A lot of you all are awesome. But there's a large amount of straight weird, crazy, I don't even know what to call them, just dirty, sick individuals that are drawn to true crime. And it always makes me just not want to even talk about it anymore. You know, because I don't want to make content for an audience of sick and twisted weirdos that believes certain things that they see online. I want to have an audience of people who at least have common sense and common decency. I'm not perfect. We joke around here. We have fun here. But for the love of God, there are just some places where people should not take things. And the true crime community knows no boundaries. It knows no boundaries. And that's why, like, I always try to steer away and talk about other topics as well. And that's why if I cover one true crime case, I may not dive directly into another true crime case because I don't want to deal with some of these people, and I don't even want to make content for some of these people to watch. And I don't want you all to think that I'm talking about you directly, because most likely you're a supporter of mine, and I love you all. But there's just these weird people, man. You all have seen them. You're part of the community. You watch these videos. You know the type of people I'm talking about. And when it gets to the point where you're making up stories about Quinton Simon, you're making up stories about Danny and Quinton Simon being in a sexual relationship together. Why? What in the hell is going on? And then the way the true crime community works is they amplify the sickness because people want to cling on to it. Oh, here's something else to talk about. Let's all speculate around this. It's clearly a BS post that was put out there by a troll. So that's where we're at in the Quinton Simon case. Like I said, we have tons more information that we're going to get, but I don't expect it to be necessarily anytime soon. We're going to have to wait for trial. We're going to have to wait for certain pieces of information to come out. And when they do, I'll be here to cover it. But let's not make up random stuff just to talk about it. But at the end of the day, that little viral thing that's going on, that's fake. And the reality is that Billie Jo is getting out of jail today as well. So that's where we're at. A lot of you all have been asking for updates. Those are the updates. Let me know your thoughts about this down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe, ring the notification bell, and I'll talk to you all in the next video.